year 2189, humanity encountered the Varkaan Empire for the first time. The Varkaan were an ancient alien civilization thousands of years ahead of humanity. Their warships could cross galaxies in seconds. Their soldiers wore armor that no ordinary human weapon could penetrate. Their weapons were powerful enough to destroy entire cities. The Varkaan Emperor believed that no species in the universe was more intelligent or more powerful than his own. When the Varkaan fleet entered Earth's orbit, the entire planet watched in fear. Then the Emperor appeared on every screen. "Humanity," he said coldly, "your civilization is primitive. Your technology is insignificant. Surrender, and some of you may be allowed to survive." The United Earth Council refused. "We will never surrender." The Emperor smiled. "Then your world will become ours." He ordered his commanders to display satellite images of Earth. One image appeared. It showed a peaceful park filled with dogs. German shepherds, Labradors, Huskies, golden retrievers. The Varkaan commanders began laughing. The Emperor pointed at the screen. "What are those?" The human ambassador answered calmly. "Dogs. Soldiers? No. Engineers? No. Warriors? No." The Emperor laughed louder. "You possess interstellar technology, yet you allow primitive animals to live inside your homes?" The ambassador looked directly at him. "They are our companions." The Emperor shook his head. "Your species is even more primitive than we thought." The ambassador gave him one final warning. "You are making a mistake." The Emperor smiled. "No. Humanity is making the mistake." Then the invasion began. Varkaan warships descended toward Earth. Human fighter jets launched everything they had. Missiles streaked through the sky. Nuclear weapons were fired. But none of it mattered. The Varkaan shields absorbed the attacks as if they were nothing. Within minutes, human defense squadrons were destroyed. Alien soldiers landed in major cities. Military bases fell. Communication networks collapsed. Millions of people were captured. And then the Varkaan soldiers began entering homes. They took food, technology, weapons, and eventually they began taking the dogs. One Varkaan soldier entered a destroyed house and found a black German shepherd hiding beneath a broken table. The dog's name was Max. His owner had been killed only hours earlier. Max slowly stepped out. The alien soldier laughed. "You." He pointed his weapon at the dog. "You are nothing." Max stared at him. The soldier grabbed him and dragged him outside. Max did not attack. He did not bark. He simply looked at the soldier, as if memorizing his face. Max was loaded onto an alien transport ship with hundreds of other captured dogs. Deep beneath the ruins of Earth, Colonel Sarah Kane watched the invasion from an underground command center. "Casualties?" she asked. A tired officer answered. 43 million and rising." Sarah closed her eyes. Then another officer approached. "Colonel, there is something else." "What?" "The aliens are capturing our dogs." Sarah looked at the screen. Hundreds of dogs were being transported away from Earth. "Why?" "We believe they intend to study them." Sarah stared at the screen. Her expression hardened. "We have to stop them." The officer looked away. "We can barely protect ourselves." Sarah said nothing. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out an old photograph. A black German shepherd stared back at her. His name was Rex. Rex had died months earlier while protecting Sarah during a battlefield evacuation. Sarah touched the photograph. "I'm sorry, boy." She had no idea that somewhere in space, another German shepherd was already becoming the beginning of humanity's revenge. On the Varkaan prison ship Karzul, scientists began examining the captured dogs. They tested their hearing, their sense of smell, their reaction speed, their memory. The scientists laughed at the results. Primitive, low intelligence, non-threatening. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed the dogs were not paying attention. They were. A border collie memorized the route of every security guard. A husky learned which voices belonged to which guards. A Belgian Malinois studied the laboratory doors. And Max watched everything. One night, a Varkaan scientist wrote in his report, "Subjects demonstrate no meaningful strategic intelligence." Behind him, Max was staring at the scientist's military badge. A strange symbol was printed on it, the symbol of the Varkaan military command. Max stared at it for several seconds. Then he looked toward the other dogs. A husky lifted its head. The border collie turned toward Max. No dog barked. No dog made a sound. They communicated through tiny movements and focused looks. The Varkaan cameras recorded everything. But the scientists dismissed it as meaningless animal behavior. They did not understand what was happening. The dogs were learning. They were remembering. And that night, without making a sound, they made their first decision. They would escape. They would find their humans. And they would make the aliens pay. The Varkaan Empire believed it had conquered Earth. But it had made one terrible mistake. It had laughed at the dogs. The Varkaan prison ship Karzul had traveled far beyond Earth. Deep inside the enormous vessel, 317 captured Earth dogs were being held inside a high-security laboratory. The Varkaan scientists believed the animals were completely under their control. They were wrong. Every night, strange failures appeared throughout the laboratory. A door unlocked for exactly 3 seconds. A security camera suddenly went dark. A sensor reported movement where nothing was visible. The Varkaan engineers blamed the machines. They never suspected the dogs. A Belgian Malinois had memorized the security guard's patrol route. A border collie had learned which doors opened automatically. A husky had discovered that the ventilation system carried sound from the security room. And Max watched everything. He remembered every face, every door, every sound, every routine. One day, a Varkaan scientist brought Max into a testing chamber. A holographic simulation appeared. On the screen, Varkaan soldiers were attacking human civilians. The scientist wanted to measure Max's emotional response. Max stared at the screen. His body became completely still. Then he noticed something in the corner of the hologram. The Varkaan military symbol. The same symbol he had seen on the scientist's badge. Max memorized it. The scientist smiled. Interesting. Then Max was returned to his cage. But the scientist never realized what had just happened. Max now knew exactly what the Varkaan military command symbol looked like. And he was waiting. At 3:17 in the morning, the small red light above the main laboratory door blinked. Max lifted his head. The husky looked toward him. The border collie stood up. The Belgian Malinois moved closer to the cage door. 3 seconds later, the security system restarted. Click. The border collie pushed the cage latch with its nose. The door opened. Another cage opened. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of dogs were free. No barking. No panic. No chaos. They moved through the corridors as if they had practiced it 100 times. Some went toward the security room. Others moved toward the ventilation system. Max and 6 other dogs headed toward the command deck. A Varkaan guard suddenly noticed them. He raised his weapon. Alert! A dog ran past his feet. The guard looked down for a single second. That was enough. 2 other dogs attacked from behind. The guard fell. His weapon hit the floor. The alarm began screaming. Red emergency lights filled the corridor. Varkaan soldiers rushed toward the laboratory. But the dogs were already inside the security system. 1 dog entered the control room. Another reached the main console. A third crawled beneath the control panel. Suddenly, doors across the prison ship began opening. Human prisoners escaped. Alien prisoners escaped. Entire sections of the prison fell into chaos. The Karzul was no longer a prison. It had become a rebellion. Max reached the command deck. A massive holographic map appeared in front of him. Hundreds of Varkaan planets were displayed. But one planet caught his attention. Varkaan Prime, the homeworld of the Varkaan Empire. Max approached the navigation console. The system scanned him. Unknown biological entity. Max placed one paw against the control panel. A military file suddenly appeared. It contained the plans for Earth. Max stared at the information. Then he saw something that made him completely still. Operation Silent Earth. The Varkaan invasion was not simply about conquering humanity. They had another plan. They intended to release a chemical agent into Earth's atmosphere that would permanently destroy human reproduction. Humanity would slowly disappear. No future generations. No recovery. No Earth. Max stared at the coordinates. Then he looked at the navigation system. He did not destroy it. He copied the coordinates. An emergency transmitter activated. A signal raced through space. Back on Earth, Colonel Sarah Kane was standing inside the underground command center when one of the screens suddenly came alive. A single location appeared. Varkaan Prime. Sarah stared at it. Who sent this? The scientist beside her shook his head. We don't know. Then another image appeared. A black German shepherd. Sarah froze. For 1 second, she thought she was looking at Rex. But it wasn't Rex. It was Max. At the bottom of the screen, 3 words appeared. We remember. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She looked toward the remaining commanders. How many warships do we have? 19. 19. That's all that survived. Sarah looked back at Max's image. Then 19 is enough. The commander stared at her. Colonel, we would be attacking the entire Varkaan Empire. Sarah nodded. I know. We cannot win. Sarah looked at the dogs appearing on the screen. We don't have to fight alone. For the first time since the invasion began, Sarah smiled. Prepare the fleet. The remaining human ships began moving into position. Meanwhile, aboard Karzul, Max stood at the front of the command deck. Behind him stood hundreds of escaped dogs. They had lost their homes. They had lost their humans. But they had not lost their loyalty. The Varkaan Empire had called them primitive. It had called them useless. It had called them incapable of understanding war. Now those same animals were standing inside the command center of an alien warship. And they had just discovered the location of the enemy's homeworld. The first stage of the plan was complete. Humanity had a target. The dogs had a reason. And the Varkaan Empire had no idea what was coming. For the first time in history, the dogs were going to war. 3 days later, the skies above Varkaan Prime changed forever. The Varkaan homeworld was considered the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Its orbital defenses were protected by thousands of warships. Its cities were surrounded by energy shields. Its military bases were buried beneath kilometers of reinforced metal. No enemy had ever reached the surface. The Varkaan Emperor was completely confident. Until the warning sirens began. Unidentified fleet approaching. The Emperor stood from his throne. How many? The officer looked at the screen. 19 human warships. The Emperor laughed. 19. Yes, Majesty. Destroy them. The Varkaan defense fleet launched immediately. Thousands of fighters filled the sky. But something unexpected happened. The human fleet did not attack. Instead, hundreds of small transport ships separated from the formation. The Varkaan commanders scanned them. They aren't carrying weapons. Then what are they carrying? The scanner returned a strange result. Biological life forms. The commander frowned. What kind? The answer made him laugh. Dogs. The Varkaan officers burst into laughter. Again, just like they had laughed when they first saw Earth. Humanity is sending animals to fight us? The commander gave the order. Let them come. The first transport ships entered the atmosphere. Their doors opened. Dogs jumped out. Hundreds of them. German shepherds, huskies, Labradors, border collies, Belgian Malinois, golden retrievers. They landed across the cities of Varkaan Prime. The Varkaan soldiers raised their weapons. But the dogs did not attack. They ran. Some moved toward communication towers. Others entered power stations. Some disappeared into underground tunnels. Others reached military buildings. The Varkaan commanders watched in confusion. What are they doing? No one had an answer. High above the planet, Colonel Sarah Kane watched hundreds of blue signals moving across her tactical screen. Every dog carried a small transmitter. Sarah waited. The Varkaan military network remained fully operational. Then Max gave the signal. Sarah looked at the screen. Phase 1 complete. A commander asked. Phase 2. Sarah took a breath. Now. Across Varkaan Prime, the dogs stopped moving. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the lights of the first military city went dark. One after another, entire districts lost power. Communication towers stopped transmitting. Military radar systems began receiving false signals. The Varkaan defense network started collapsing. The Varkaan commanders panicked. Enemy ships detected. Where? Everywhere. How many? Thousands. The Emperor rushed into the command chamber. What is happening? A terrified officer answered. We don't know. Find the enemy. Hundreds of security screens appeared. The Emperor expected to see human soldiers. Instead, every screen showed dogs. A German shepherd standing beside a military entrance. A husky sitting next to a communication tower. A border collie walking through a government building. A Labrador standing inside a power station. The Emperor stared at the screens. Destroy them. But the Varkaan soldiers hesitated. They were confused. Their weapons were designed to identify military targets. Their systems did not classify dogs as serious threats. The Varkaan military had been designed around the assumption that an enemy would behave like an army. The dogs did not. They moved through places where soldiers would never be expected. They triggered doors, blocked sensors, disrupted communications, and created thousands of false alarms. The entire defense network became confused. Then something even stranger happened. A Varkaan soldier entered an underground shelter and found a small beagle sitting beside a wall. The soldier raised his weapon. Then he noticed the collar. It read, Luna, property of Amelia Carter. The soldier recognized the name. Amelia Carter was a human prisoner. The soldier slowly lowered his weapon. Luna stared at him. She did not growl. She did not attack. She simply stood there. The soldier suddenly understood. These animals were not fighting because they wanted blood. They were fighting because they remembered. Back at the command center, Sarah watched the signal map. Phase 3. The human fleet finally attacked. 19 warships broke through the weakened orbital defense. Varkaan fighters rushed toward them, but their communication network was still collapsing. Human ships fired. The first Varkaan defense station exploded. Then another. Then another. For the first time in centuries, Varkaan Prime was under attack. The Emperor rushed toward the emergency bunker. Activate the planetary cannon. His generals tried. Nothing happened. Why isn't it working? The chief engineer looked terrified. The command network has been compromised. By humans? The engineer hesitated. No. The Emperor turned. Then who? The engineer whispered. Dogs. The Emperor stared at him in disbelief. Dogs. Before the engineer could answer, a sound came from the entrance. Scratch. 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 Everyone turned. The massive bunker doors slowly opened. Standing in the doorway was Max. Behind him were dozens of dogs. The Emperor raised his weapon. Stay back. Max continued walking. The Emperor stepped backward. You are nothing but an animal. Max stopped. He stared directly into the Emperor's eyes. For the first time, the Emperor was afraid. Then the bunker speakers suddenly came alive. Colonel Sarah Kane's voice filled the room. You laughed at them. The Emperor looked around. Sarah continued. You called them primitive. Max took another step forward. You called them useless. The Emperor's face changed. Sarah's voice became colder. But you made one mistake. A pause. You thought they needed to become like you to defeat you. The Emperor stared at Max. Sarah continued. They didn't. Outside, human ships filled the sky. Across the planet, Varkaan soldiers were surrendering. And inside the bunker, Max stood silently before the Emperor. The alien ruler who had once laughed at Earth was now standing face to face with the creature he had called worthless. The war was not over yet, but the Varkaan Empire had already lost something more important than its military. It had lost its arrogance, and the final battle was about to begin. The Varkaan Emperor stood frozen inside the emergency bunker. Outside, the sky of Varkaan Prime was filled with burning ships. Human fighters moved between the massive Varkaan warships. Explosions illuminated the clouds. Across the planet, Varkaan soldiers were abandoning their weapons. But inside the bunker, nobody moved. Max stood only a few meters away from the Emperor. The Emperor slowly raised his weapon. You think you have one? Max did not move. The Emperor pointed the weapon directly at him. You are an animal. Max continued staring at him. You cannot understand strategy. You cannot understand war. You cannot understand power. The Emperor took another step forward. You were nothing when we found you. Colonel Sarah Kane entered the bunker. She walked toward Max and stood beside him. "No," she said. The Emperor turned toward her. Sarah looked directly into his eyes. "You were wrong from the beginning." The Emperor laughed bitterly. "You believe these creatures defeated my empire?" Sarah glanced at Max. "They didn't defeat you because they were stronger." She paused. "They defeated you because you underestimated them." The Emperor looked toward the bunker screens. One by one, the screens showed the same thing. Varkaan military bases had fallen. Communication towers were offline. The planetary defense network had collapsed. Human prisoners were being rescued. And everywhere the Varkaan soldiers looked, there were dogs. German shepherds searching destroyed buildings. Labradors helping rescue teams find survivors. Border collies guiding humans through underground tunnels. Huskies carrying emergency supplies. The creatures the Varkaan had considered useless were helping save the people the Empire had tried to destroy. The Emperor slowly lowered his weapon. "How?" Sarah answered. "Loyalty." The Emperor said nothing. Humans gave these dogs food, shelter, love, and protection. Sarah placed her hand on Max's head. And when humanity needed them, they remembered. The Emperor looked at Max. For the first time, he seemed to understand. The dogs had never wanted power. They had never wanted the Varkaan Empire. They simply wanted their humans back. Then the bunker shook violently. A massive explosion erupted somewhere above them. The Emperor looked toward the ceiling. What was that? Sarah checked her communicator. The final Varkaan fleet has surrendered. Silence filled the room. After hundreds of years of conquest, the Varkaan Empire had finally lost. The Emperor slowly sat down. "Then kill me." Sarah shook her head. "No." The Emperor looked surprised. "You invaded our world. You killed millions. You tried to erase humanity." Sarah stared at him. "But we are not you." The Emperor looked at Max. "And the dogs?" Sarah smiled slightly. "They already decided your punishment." The Emperor frowned. "What punishment?" Sarah pointed toward the bunker door. "You get to live." The Emperor stared at her. "And remember, the war was over." But the story of the dogs spread throughout the galaxy. Every world that had once feared the Varkaan Empire heard about Earth. They heard about the humans who refused to surrender. And they heard about the animals the Varkaan had laughed at. The dogs became symbols of courage. On Earth, reconstruction began. Cities that had been destroyed were rebuilt. Families returned home. Children went back to school. And thousands of missing dogs were reunited with their owners. Some reunions were joyful. Some were heartbreaking. Many humans had never returned. But their dogs still waited. At a rebuilt military base, Colonel Sarah Kane stood beside a memorial. Hundreds of dog tags were placed beneath a large stone monument. At the top were simple words. They were never just dogs. Sarah looked down at Max. "You know, Rex would have liked you." Max looked up at her. For a moment, he remained completely still. Then he placed one paw against her hand. Sarah smiled. Above them, the stars were shining. The same stars from which the Varkaan fleet had once arrived. But now, humanity was no longer afraid of them. Years later, the Varkaan Empire signed a permanent peace treaty with Earth. Their new leaders came to Earth to apologize. One young Varkaan child saw a Labrador sitting beside a human family. He slowly approached. "Is it dangerous?" the child asked. His father looked at the dog. "No." "Why?" The father thought for a moment. "Because it has chosen not to be." The child gently touched the Labrador's head. The dog wagged its tail. For the first time, the Varkaan people understood something their emperor had never understood. Strength was not always about weapons. Power was not always about technology. And courage was not always about fighting. Sometimes, the strongest creature in the room was the one that simply refused to abandon the people it loved. The Varkaan had laughed at humanity's dogs. They had called them primitive. They had called them useless. They had believed that animals could never understand war. But they were wrong. The dogs never needed to become soldiers. They simply remained loyal. And that loyalty became stronger than the Empire's weapons. Humanity survived. The Varkaan Empire surrendered. And the dogs went home. The final lesson was remembered across the galaxy. Never underestimate the creature that has nothing to prove but everything to protect. And whenever someone on Earth heard an alien visitor ask, "Why are humans so attached to these animals?" the answer was always the same: because when the entire galaxy turned against us, our dogs